The salty breeze off the Atlantic barely stirred the heavy air inside the Crab Shack, a weathered diner perched on the edge of Port Haven, North Carolina. It was late August, and the ceiling fan spun lazily, doing little to ease the humidity that clung to every surface. The diner's windows, streaked with sea spray, framed a view of the harbor where fishing boats bobbed under a gray sky. Inside, the lunch rush was in full swing. Locals and tourists packed the booths, their voices mingling with the clatter of plates and the sizzle of the grill. Amara Coleman, 32, moved through the chaos with a dancer's precision. Her navy blue apron was tied tightly over a white polo, her name tag pinned slightly askew. She balanced a tray of iced teas in one hand while clearing empty oyster baskets with the other. Her braids were pulled back in a neat bun, but sweat glistened at her temples. Amara didn't talk much, not beyond the polite "Can I get you anything else?" or "I'll be right back with your check." Most customers didn't notice her quietness, they saw only the efficiency, the way she kept their drinks full and their orders straight. Today, though, Amara had made a rare choice. The heat was relentless, and her usual long-sleeved shirt felt like a straitjacket. She'd swapped it for a short-sleeved polo, exposing the scars that snaked up her right forearm, jagged, pale lines that stood out against her dark skin, disappearing under the fabric at her elbow. She'd hesitated in the break room, staring at her reflection in a cracked mirror, but practicality won out. It was just too hot. At table 6, a corner booth by the window, 4 young fishermen sat sprawled, their work boots leaving smudges on the linoleum. They were in their mid-20s, sunburned and loud, their t-shirts emblazoned with the logo of a local charter company. Empty beer bottles cluttered their table, and they were halfway through a basket of fried shrimp. As Amara approached with a pitcher of water, the one closest to the aisle, Jake, with a patchy beard and a backward cap, leaned back, his eyes locking onto her arm. "Whoa, what happened there?" he said, his voice carrying over the diner's hum. "Get in a fight with a shark or something?" His buddies snickered, one choking on his beer. Amara's hand tightened on the pitcher, but her face stayed neutral. "Need anything else?" she asked, her tone flat. Jake grinned, undeterred. "Nah, but seriously, that's some horror movie stuff." "You get those wrestling a gator?" Another laugh rippled through the group. The fourth guy, quieter, just shook his head, but his smirk was unmistakable. Amara poured the water, her movements deliberate. "I'll get your check," she said, turning away. Behind her, Jake muttered, "Bet she's got a story she ain't telling. Probably a bar fight." The laughter followed her to the counter, where she set the pitcher down harder than she meant to. Lena, the cook, a wiry woman with a sleeve of tattoos, glanced over from the grill. "You okay, Mar?" she asked, flipping a burger. Amara nodded. "Fine." But her jaw was tight, and her eyes stayed fixed on the order slips in front of her. She'd grown used to the stares, the whispers, the assumptions. In a town like Port Haven, where everyone knew everyone's business, a black woman with scars drew stories like moths to a flame. Some thought she'd been in a car accident, others whispered about domestic violence or gang trouble. Amara let them talk. Explaining felt like giving away pieces of herself, and she'd already lost enough. But table 6 didn't let up. Every time she passed, there was a new jab. "Yo, she's got that tough chick vibe, but those scars? Man, that's rough. Bet she's hiding more under that shirt." Amara kept moving, refilling ketchup bottles, bussing tables, wiping down menus. Her silence was her shield, but each comment chipped away at it. By the time she dropped off their check, her chest felt tight, like the air itself was pressing down. At the counter, an older woman sat alone, her silver hair pulled into a loose braid. She wore a faded denim jacket despite the heat, and her hands, weathered but steady, cradled a mug of black coffee. She'd been watching the room quietly, her hazel eyes sharp. Amara hadn't noticed her before, but something about her presence felt solid, like an anchor in the storm of noise. As Amara passed, the woman's gaze lingered on her arm, not with pity, but with something else. Recognition, maybe. But Amara was too focused on surviving the shift to wonder why. The fishermen paid their bill, leaving a stingy tip and a mess of napkins. As they shuffled out, Jake called over his shoulder, "Take care, Scarface." The nickname landed like a slap, and the diner went quiet for a heartbeat. Amara froze, her back to the door, her hands gripping a tray. Lena muttered a curse under her breath, but before anyone could speak, the woman at the counter set her mug down with a soft clink. "Young men like that," she said, her voice low but clear, "think pain's a joke till they felt it themselves." The words weren't loud, but they carried, slicing through the tension. Jake paused at the door, his grin faltering, but his friends pulled him out, their laughter fading into the parking lot. Amara turned, meeting the woman's eyes for a moment. There was no judgment there, only understanding. But Amara didn't trust it, not yet. She nodded once and went back to work, the weight of the shift heavier than ever. The lunch rush tapered off, leaving the crab shack quieter but no cooler. Amara swept the floor near the empty booths, her movements mechanical. Table SAXS words still echoed in her head, each one a reminder of the life she'd tried to leave behind. She'd been out of the Navy for 5 years, discharged after the incident that left her arm scarred and her dreams shattered. Port Haven was supposed to be a fresh start, but some days, it felt like she'd only traded one battlefield for another. The woman at the counter, Clara Voss, though Amara didn't know her name yet, hadn't moved. She sipped her coffee slowly, her eyes following Amara's path across the diner. Clara was 67, a retired Navy chief with a spine of steel and a heart that had weathered too many losses. She'd come to Port Haven to be near the ocean, but she carried her service with her, etched into her posture and the faint anchor tattoo on her wrist. As Amara passed with a broom, Clara spoke again, her voice steady but warm. "That ink on your arm," she said, nodding toward the faint tattoo half hidden beneath Amara's scars. "Is that a trident's shadow?" Amara stopped, her grip tightening on the broom. The tattoo, a stylized trident crossed with a wave, was barely visible, faded by time and scar tissue. Most people mistook it for a random design, but Clara's question was too specific to be a guess. Amara's first instinct was to deflect. She hadn't talked about her service since moving to Port Haven, and the tattoo was a relic she'd stopped acknowledging. But Clara's tone wasn't intrusive, it was like a door left open, inviting but not demanding. "Yeah," Amara said finally, her voice low. "It is." Clara nodded, as if confirming something she'd already known. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing her own tattoo, an older version of the same trident, its lines blurred but unmistakable. "Shadow Team 4, she said. Persian Gulf, 92. You?" Amara hesitated, her throat tight. "Shadow Team 9. South China Sea, 2018. The words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. The diner was nearly empty now, save for a couple of regulars nursing sodas. Lena watched from the kitchen, her spatula paused, sensing something shifting. Clara leaned forward, her elbows on the counter. "I knew a few from Team 9, she said. "Heard about the Vanguard incident." "That was you, wasn't it?" Amara's breath caught. The Vanguard, a Navy vessel hit by a missile during a covert op, had been her last mission. She'd been in the engine room when the blast came, dragging 2 crewmates to safety while flames licked her arm. She didn't answer, but her silence was enough. Clara's eyes softened. "You pulled Lieutenant Carter and Petty Officer Ruiz out, didn't you? Word got around. They called you the anchor that day." Amara looked away, her jaw clenched. "That's just what they said. Doesn't mean anything." Clara set her mug down, her voice firm but kind. "It means something to the people you saved. And to those of us who know what it costs." She glanced at Table SAXS' empty booth. "Those boys don't. They see scars and think they're a punchline. But I see a Shadow Team tattoo, and I know what it takes to earn one." Amara's hands shook slightly, and she leaned the broom against the wall to steady herself. She hadn't heard the term Shadow Team in years, hadn't let herself think about the nights on the Vanguard, the camaraderie, the fear. Clara's words were pulling those memories to the surface, and Amara wasn't sure she was ready. Before she could respond, a family walked in, breaking the moment. Amara grabbed a stack of menus and headed to seat them, but Clara called after her. "You ever want to talk? I'm at the marina most days." Boats called Salty Grace. Amara nodded, more out of habit than agreement, and went back to work. But as she moved through the rest of her shift, Clara's words lingered, heavy and insistent. By closing time, Amara was exhausted, her arm aching from the day's heat. She clocked out, untied her apron, and stepped into the humid night. The harbor was quiet, the boats swaying under a crescent moon. She walked past the marina, her eyes drifting to the docks where Salty Grace was moored. Clara was there, sitting on the deck with a lantern, writing in a notebook. Amara paused, her feet rooted to the pavement. Part of her wanted to walk over, to ask what Clara had meant by the anchor. But the weight of 5 years' silence held her back. She turned and headed home, the tattoo on her arm burning like a memory she couldn't outrun. Amara's apartment was a small studio above a bait shop, smelling faintly of salt and diesel. The walls were bare except for a single photo, a younger Amara in her navy dress blues, smiling beside her shadow team on the Vanguard's deck. She hadn't looked at it in months, but tonight, she couldn't avoid it. Clara's words had stirred something, and the quiet of her apartment only amplified it. She sank onto the couch, her scarred arm resting on her knee. The tattoo was a map of a life she'd tried to forget: training in Coronado, missions in the South China Sea, the Vanguard's final night. She'd been 27 then, fearless, certain she'd retire as a chief like Clara. But the missile changed everything. The scars weren't just on her skin, they were in the nightmares, the panic attacks, the way she flinched at loud noises. Port Haven was supposed to be her escape, but the diner's mockery proved she couldn't outrun her past. The next morning, Amara woke to a text from her cousin, Jada, who worked at the library. Heard about yesterday. You good? Amara typed fine but didn't send it. Instead, she showered, dressed, and headed to the marina before she could talk herself out of it. Salty Grace was easy to spot, a 30-foot sailboat with a faded hull and a trident painted on the bow. Clara was scrubbing the deck, her denim jacket tossed over a chair. Figured you might show up, Clara said, not looking up. Coffee's in the cabin if you want some. Amara climbed aboard, feeling out of place but oddly welcome. The boat rocked gently, and the sound of waves against the hull was soothing. Over coffee, Clara didn't push. She talked about her own service, storms in the Gulf, a near miss with a mine, the friends she'd lost. Her stories weren't grand, they were raw, human, and Amara found herself listening, really listening. Finally, Clara asked, "What's keeping you quiet about the Vanguard?" Amara stared at the horizon. "I don't know. Feels like if I talk, it'll all come back. The fire, the screams. I don't want to live there again." Clara nodded. "You don't have to live there. But burying it doesn't make it go away. It just festers." Clara pulled a photo from her wallet, her shadow team, arms around each other, laughing. "This was my anchor," she said. "Not the tattoo, not the missions. The people. You were that for Carter and Ruiz. You're still that, even if you don't feel it." Amara's eyes stung, and she looked away. "I don't feel like an anchor. I feel broken." Clara leaned back, her voice steady. "Broken things still hold weight. You're here, showing up every day. That's not nothing." She handed Amara a flyer for a veterans group that met at the community center. "No pressure. But you're not as alone as you think." Amara took the flyer, her fingers tracing the paper's edge. She didn't promise to go, but she didn't throw it away either. Back at the diner, the shift felt different. Table SAXS fishermen were there again, quieter this time, but their presence grated. When Jake tried a half-hearted joke, "No sharks today, right?" Amara met his eyes. "Not today," she said, her voice firm. He looked away, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of power. That night, she pulled the photo from her wall and studied it. Carter and Ruiz were there, alive because of her. She touched the tattoo, its lines blurred but enduring. Maybe Clara was right. Maybe it was time to stop running. The veterans group met on Thursdays in a community center that smelled of old wood and fresh paint. Amara stood outside, the flyer crumpled in her pocket. She almost turned back, but the memory of Clara's steady voice pushed her through the door. Inside, a dozen people sat in a circle, men and women, young and old, all carrying stories in their eyes. Clara was there, giving her a nod that said, "You made it." The facilitator, a retired Marine named Marcus, asked if anyone wanted to share. Amara's heart raced, but when her turn came, she spoke.
I'm Amara. Navy, Shadow Team 9. I was on the Vanguard when it went down. Got these scars pulling people out.
Her voice shook, but she kept going, telling the story she'd buried, the fire, the fear, the weight of survival. When she finished, the room was quiet, but not with pity. It was respect. A man across the circle, a Vietnam vet, spoke up. I know that weight. You carried it then. You're carrying it now. Others shared their stories, and Amara realized she wasn't alone. These strangers understood the scars, the silences, the strength it took to keep going. At the diner, things shifted. Word spread, as it does in small towns. The fisherman at table 6 stopped joking, and one day, Jake left a note with his tip, sorry.
Didn't know.
Amara pocketed it, not for the apology but for the acknowledgement. Regulars started asking about her service, not out of curiosity but respect. A teacher brought her class to meet the local hero, and though Amara cringed at the label, she answered their questions, her voice growing steadier.
Jada noticed the change.
You're standing taller, she said over dinner.
Amara smiled, a real one. Feels like I'm finding my footing.
She started wearing short sleeves, letting the tattoo show. It wasn't just ink, it was a badge, a reminder of who she'd been and who she still was.
One evening, Amara walked to the marina with a thermos of coffee. Clara was on Salty Grace, reading by lantern light.
Thought you could use this, Amara said, handing her the thermos.
Clara grinned. You're sticking around, then?
Amara nodded.
Yeah. Think I am.
As she walked home, the ocean breeze felt lighter, the stars brighter. Her scars were still there, but they weren't a burden anymore. They were proof she'd survived, proof she'd saved others, proof she was still an anchor not just for her team, but for herself.